Today I want to go over some of the information that's been announced by Treyarch themselves regarding the changes they're making to Liberty Falls atmosphere, tone, setting, whatever you want to call it, and also some modifications that are coming to the HUD in BO6 Zombies. Now, a lot of this information, or actually all of it, was revealed in Call of Duty podcast called the COD Pod. I honestly didn't know COD had a podcast. Everyone's having one nowadays, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. But anyways, they talked about how the Liberty Falls map we saw at COD Next, the map that the community has lambasted, and justifiably so, was a earlier version. It wasn't the final version. And that they're going to do some touch-ups. They're going to change some things about the way the map looks, feels, yada yada. I'm paraphrasing here, basically. But this announcement is kind of interesting. If you told me 5 years ago, a few years ago, whatever, that in the future, Treyarch would make an announcement that they were going to patch things regarding the setting of a map, my jaw would be on the floor. Because I feel like this tone and the atmosphere of Zombies has been kind of taken for granted over the years. We've always just been used to maps looking good, having a nice tone, really fitting a setting well. I don't recall any time where we've had this type of backlash towards a map like Liberty Falls ever before in how Zombies looks. But after, 4 years now of this post-Cold War era that we're in of Zombies, specifically, I should mention that, a lot of the maps we've gotten have been either taken from the campaign or multiplayer and stripped out of a lot of its atmosphere, which at the time, like in Cold War Zombies, people didn't really complain too much about it. Sure, there were some criticisms. I was certainly not crazy about the way the maps in Cold War looked, but our focus in Cold War was a bit different. It was more focused on the gameplay because we didn't want a repeat of Black Ops 4 Zombies. But here we are many years later, shockingly, and now we're seeing kind of the same thing, at least with Liberty Falls. So the backlash towards it feels a bit different. There are a few ways where you can make a town setting compelling. Like Town from Transit, I think, is more compelling than Liberty Falls, and that's partly because there's a theme to it. It's supposed to be a post-apocalyptic map, so they lean into it. They add things like lava to really highlight how terrible the environment is, how much destruction there is. Gameplay wise, not the funnest thing in the world. So Liberty Falls needs to really lean into whatever theme it's trying to go for, and it just doesn't feel like it has a strong theme right now. On top of that, another way you can really make a town setting interesting is by maybe leaning into the local culture that the town is set in. So Liberty Falls takes place in West Virginia. What is West Virginia known for? It's known for the Appalachians, or the Appalachian Mountains. I don't know the proper way of saying it or calling it, but leaning into maybe the folklore of that region might make the map a bit more compelling, and not just from an atmospheric standpoint, but also in gameplay wise. I'm not expecting Treyarch to make big changes to the gameplay of Liberty Falls because none of that has been announced, but what I would have liked to see is maybe you have a folklore creature that's a special enemy type instead of reusing enemy like a mangler on the map, stuff like that to make the map feel a bit unique. So with all that said, Liberty Falls is getting these modifications, and for me, I'm more cautiously optimistic. I hope Treyarch does do some interesting and meaningful changes to the look of the map instead of making small adjustments. But I think my big takeaway from all this is the fact that future maps might be spared from what we saw with Liberty Falls, knowing this backlash, knowing how much the community just turned on Treyarch, turned on BO6 Zombies, just from the atmosphere and feeling of Liberty Falls alone. So Treyarch also talked about making tweaks to the HUD before launch, the HUD for Zombies. Now with BO6 Zombies, and BO6 in general, they announced HUD customization a while back, and this is great news in my opinion. This is something I've wanted to see in Call of Duty just generally for years. So we're finally getting it. But there are people that are still taking issue to the HUD in this game, specifically with Zombies. they feel like it just doesn't distinguish itself enough from the multiplayer and Warzone, and feeling like a unique HUD that's designed for the mode. And instead, like, elements like the minimap just doesn't really scream zombies to us because it doesn't feel necessary, it doesn't feel required. Sure, we can change that out once the game launches, but still, like, some people like having that default HUD and appreciate it. If they're going to make any changes to the HUD, personally, I would like to see map-specific HUDs return. We haven't seen it since Shadows of Evil. I don't know exactly why they stopped doing that, but for basically 4 maps from Mob through Shadows, each map had its own HUD. I think it was really cool. It made the maps feel unique, makes maps feel more distinct with its atmosphere, and I think that return where each default HUD really leans into the map's setting or atmosphere. Maybe for Terminus, it has a tropical look to it. Maybe you have some vegetation on the HUD, like stuff like that, to really signal like what the location of the map, where it is. And then Liberty Falls, again, like the map doesn't have a strong theme, so I don't know what exactly they would do with that. But, they can be creative. It just added more flavors to those maps, and let's be real, BO6 Zombies is in need of some spice. It needs some ingredients to really make it appetizing, and right now it just doesn't have a lot of that, especially in the aesthetic department with the HUD. And I would go even further and say that the main menu of the game just looks boring, at least from what we saw in COD Next. It just doesn't distinguish itself from the other modes that much. I miss the days of Black Ops 2 Zombies where like that main menu they had was just so distinct from the rest of the game. It screamed zombies to me, and you just don't get that nowadays. You haven't gotten that since Cold War. So with all that said, Liberty Falls is getting these modifications, and for me, I'm more cautiously optimistic. I hope Treyarch does do some interesting and meaningful changes to the look of the map instead of making small adjustments. But I think my big takeaway from all this is the fact that future maps might be spared from what we saw with Liberty Falls, knowing this backlash, knowing how much the community just turned on Treyarch, turned on BO6 Zombies, just from like the atmosphere and feeling of Liberty Falls alone.